On behalf of our coalition, thank you for being with us today. I'm joined by my mayoral colleagues to advocate for a once-in-a-generation investment in critical infrastructure, both physical and human, that is certain to make our communities more resilient, sustainable, and equitable. The Build Back Better bill will extend the child tax credit, which has significantly reduced the rate of childhood poverty, and make critical investments in affordable housing. More of that here in San Antonio. We were able to couple that with our emergency housing assistance program, which has helped keep our over 45,000 families housed during this pandemic. Coupled with the Build Back Better bill, we can change the trajectory of an entire city. San Antonio's investment in workforce development pairs extremely well with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as we look to train tens of thousands of residents for future-proof, well-paying jobs in construction, trades, IT, medical, manufacturing, and other critical industries. As many of us have said before, Congress can continue empowering local governments to improve the lives of our residents by taking immediate action on this comprehensive framework. Investing in our recovery can be done without politics. And how can I be so confident in saying that? Because a bipartisan coalition of Texas mayors recognize that these pieces of legislation will only improve our communities and the quality of life for all of our people. Rarely is the business of a city in service of its people preceded with an R or a D. And so we're calling on Congress to act. And now I'll pass it off to my good friend, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner.
Good morning, and I'm hoping you can see me. Good morning, I'm Sylvester Turner. Thank you, Mayor Nirenberg. And look, I'm joining you from the city of Houston. And I'm pleased to join my fellow big city mayors and everyone on the line to discuss the importance of the Build Back Better Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. These two pieces of legislation are instrumental to the recovery of each one of our cities and to the recovery of our nation. Before I begin on why these pieces of legislation should move forward, I would like to thank President Biden and Congress for working together throughout this pandemic. The leadership that this administration and Congress has shown has been tremendous and can be seen with the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, known as ARPA, earlier this year. The city of Houston thanks you for your dedication to our nation's recovery. Next, I would like to highlight two different impacts that the passage of these pieces of legislation would do for my city. One, in its most basic forms, we will be able to make substantive repairs to worn down infrastructure. And two, we can continue to build up our neighborhoods and build complete communities by investing in our human infrastructure. First, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act can help cities, counties, regions, and states. Just like my city, just like many cities in the United States, Houston's infrastructure needs investments, and we must look at rehabilitation and reconstruction and building for tomorrow's challenges. Just to put it into perspective, in about 670 square miles, Houston supports its over 2.3 million population with over 16,000 miles of streets, over 700 at-grade railroad crossings, 6,000 miles of wastewater pipes, 39 wastewater treatment plants, and over 4,000 public work employees. These numbers are just my city and don't include all the infrastructure that the country and state provide. The infrastructure package would create more resilience, from good drainage and less flooding to mobility for our users, to access to parks, stores, healthcare, and transit, and ultimately based infrastructure that supports new businesses and services in underserved areas. Not only would the bill provide the much needed immediate needs, it would also create opportunity for cities across the city to embrace environmentally friendly infrastructure like electric vehicle charging stations and expanding the bike lane network. Secondly, now that the infrastructure package has invested in physical capital, let's discuss how the Build Back Better agenda would provide much needed investment in human capital. In the city of Houston, we focus on complete communities. We focus on undeveloped communities, which are at the bedrock of my mayoral agenda. The creation of complete communities means building up every neighborhood, especially those that have been historically overlooked, and building them up to a point where every Houstonian thrives. We as mayors and public servants are tasked to help all residents collectively overcome economic, environmental, and equity challenges, and the President's Build Back Better Act would do just that. Finally, we have foundational needs like lowering healthcare costs and providing affordable housing, investing in paid leave and early childhood education, and this framework will invest in the wraparound services that our communities need. Yes, it is about sidewalks, the trash collection, and the water quality, but complete communities are also about quality education, employment opportunities, and preventative health care. We cannot continue to invest in the same things and expect different results. We need to build up our human infrastructure, protect their environment from extreme weather conditions and contaminated landfills. To touch on what President Biden has said over and over, the Build Back Better framework is about competitiveness versus complacency, opportunity versus decay, leading the world versus letting the world pass us by. Investing in the lives of working people will exponentially assist in the United States' success and long-term recovery. And now it's my pleasure to pass it on to my colleague and friend, Mayor of Lubbock, Dan Pope.
Thank you, Mayor Turner, Mayor Nirenberg. It's great to join you guys and represent our bipartisan, easy for me to say, Texas Mayors Group. It's really, I think, a wonderful opportunity to join fellow mayors in support of a bipartisan. I sort of underscore that, bipartisan. I think that's something that we do as Texas mayors, and we're encouraging Congress to do as they consider this federal infrastructure bill. Now, the bill is not perfect, but however, I believe that we can't allow the pursuit of perfection to get in the very much needed way of progress. The infrastructure bill supports West Texas. It impacts West Texas in two ways that I'd like to talk in some detail about. Those would be the way it impacts highway and transportation funding, and then broadband. Now, let's start with highway funding. Texas has one north-south interstate today, Interstate 35. Mayors, county judges, and stakeholders along the line from Laredo to Amarillo are supporting Interstate 27. That Interstate 27 would be a critical second north-south interstate for Texas. Now, in the first 20 years of being built, this interstate would create more than $55 billion in new GDP for our state, not just West Texas, for our entire state. It would create more than 17,000 jobs, and maybe as important, it would improve our crash rates are about 21%. It would save lives, which those of us that live in rural Texas know how dangerous those roads can be. The second area is broadband, and we live in a day and time when broadband is not something that would be nice to have. It's something that every family needs. They need access to the resources that will allow them to educate their kids, and for our citizens to hold jobs that either require work from home or offer the ability to work from home. Much of West Texas, much of rural Texas is way behind in broadband build out. And I applaud the fact that those dollars are in this bill, and we would work with our ARPA funds and with the state to make certain that this bill makes an impact. So in closing, I encourage Congress to pass this critical bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's the right thing to do. Now is the time. Mayor Nirenberg, back to you.
Great, thank you, Mayor Pope and Mayor Turner. At this time, I'll turn it back to Zach from our team to begin to field any questions that have come from our media partners who've joined us. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we have Mayor Adler, I think, is still supposed to hop on in a minute, and Mayor Turner had to hop off for a second. you can, members of the media can use the Q&A portion to send questions and I'll ask them. We do have a question from Mike Board with WAI News in San Antonio. I'm directing it for Mayor Nirenberg, but it's probably a fair question for Mayor Pope as well. Biggest question of this plan is the cost. The administration promises that the cost will not be passed on to taxpayers, but his opponents are doubtful. Do you have concerns about the cost of the Build Back Better plan? I'll start with Mayor Nirenberg.
Sure. First thing I'd say is that we've seen in sharp relief the cost of doing nothing when we don't invest in our infrastructure and we don't invest in our people, in our communities, and that exacerbates the challenges that we've seen on clear display during the pandemic. And so with regard to the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, I would say that these are needed measures that will allow us to bring down costs that are being borne on future generations already with regard to the upkeep of infrastructure and the building of infrastructure to keep up with the growth in our communities. With regard to investments in human infrastructure, that is absolutely vital as we work to break cycles of generational poverty in our urban communities, as well as creating opportunities and access to economic mobility for communities that have been left out for too long. These have direct impacts on health outcomes, and we are urging Congress to act immediately to get that done.
I would just add that I believe the cost of not doing something now is much more significant than waiting and kicking the can down the road. We've continued to do that. And it's time to invest in infrastructure for Texas.
Zach, before we get to the next question, let me toss it over to Mayor Adler, who's able to join us now. And Mayor Adler, we had a few opening statements from myself, Mayor Pope, and Mayor Turner. So let me turn it to you for some comments, and we'll get back to Q&A from our media partners.
Sounds good. And I'll just be real fast. I apologize for joining late. I just know that this package and the opportunity that's presented is really significant, and unlike anything that we've ever seen before, certainly from a city infrastructure perspective. Austin is just growing as my colleague Texas cities, and we're strained. We don't have the transportation system, the housing infrastructure, the broadband, the people infrastructure that's necessary, and it's an impossible thing to catch up on. I really do see what's we hope Congress passes is the opportunity to make that generational change, that generational shift. We've already seen that with what we've been able to do with the American Rescue Plan dollars, with respect to putting us now on a path to effectively end homelessness in our city, reach equilibrium in the next several years. But the thought of being able to expand that both to capital and people infrastructure is just huge. It's life-changing, and it's just something that I sure do hope that we pass and pass quickly.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to you, Zach.
Sure. We have a question from Megan Stringer with the Express News. This one's from Mayor Nirenberg. Would the federal infrastructure money change any of San Antonio's current plans for the 2022 bond cycle?
No, I don't believe they'll change any of the specific plans with regard to direction. Obviously, we are working through the project list, and that have to go through the committees that are being appointed. What it will do is allow us to take on and accelerate needed infrastructure projects that are currently going to be waiting for the next cycle and the cycle after that to be done. We have tremendous need, over $6 billion of infrastructure need that's been identified by the community. We have a $1.2 billion bond program scheduled for May of 22. So clearly there are going to be needs that are unmet. The partnership with the federal government through this Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act will allow us to meet more of those needs that, again, are in service of the constituents that we share.
Okay, and I'm gonna open it up for a few more seconds to see if we get any more questions. Maybe do a 10 count in my head, and then we might conclude. Okay, we have a question from Jackie with the San Antonio Report for all of the mayors. Have each of you had an opportunity to speak with members of Congress who represent your cities about the status of these pieces of legislation? I'll start with Mayor Adler.
I have had that opportunity, and I don't have any greater insight though on what's going to happen. I think that everybody expects this to move forward. My hope is that this week we'll see significant movement. But I think that everybody across parties wants to do a significant infrastructure investment, and I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I would add that we certainly have had conversations with our representatives. I'm going to, the folks I've been talking to are going to be on the more conservative side of things, but I do think they can find a way to support this bipartisan infrastructure bill. We need to get it done. I think America needs to see Washington work, and I think this is a great opportunity for them to do something that benefits all of us.
And I have had conversations with the members of our congressional delegation as well, and I know my colleagues have as well. And same thing, there's a variety of opinions on the size of the bill and maybe some particulars about it. But I think there's pretty unanimous agreement that something needs to be done and needs to be done quickly in order to shore up our community's human and physical infrastructure. And so there's a desire to get something done and get something done soon.
And we have a question from Fred Cantu. Could each of the mayors speak to maybe a priority project in their area that could benefit from this funding, or maybe something that y'all are working on locally that might partner well in tandem? And we'll start with Mayor Nirenberg.
Sure. Well, we are embarking on a path to retrain and reskill tens of thousands of San Antonio residents who were impacted by the pandemic, unemployed or underemployed, and those who have been stuck in cycles of generational poverty through our Train for Jobs SA program, which ends at the end of the year, and the Ready to Work SA program, which voters authorized through the use of a 1/8 cent sales tax last November. The partnership with the federal government to help with that program will allow us to expand the impacts and ensure that a generation of San Antonians now will have access to economic mobility. One of the keys to breaking endemic cycles of generational poverty that have been has been gripping our city for a very long time.
I would say that I mentioned two opportunities in my comments earlier, but let's go with broadband. In fact, I leave this call to go into a meeting with the state broadband office to talk about things that we're going to do in Lubbock and on the South Plains. We're working closely with Amarillo and some of their efforts to expand broadband. But that is where we're going to invest some of our ARPA dollars. And I think an additional federal investment there, along with the state's participation, would allow us to accomplish something that's it truly is generational.
So for us down here, passage of this bill, I think better ensures that we're going to get the federal participation we need with Project Connect, which we passed with the voters last November to bring urban rail to our city, underground, downtown, out to the airport. We're looking for the federal match on that, and this may very well speed that up and maybe enable us to expand the program and get it done more quickly. That's going to be real important for us. We're hoping to be able to put a cap on top of I-35 as it goes through downtown, and the infrastructure monies would help us be able to cap that highway, put parkland on it or other improvements. Housing is a huge issue for us. So we're going to hopefully be able to get some additional support for taking care of the many people that continue to move into our cities.
It's right down there, like on that street.
Great, thank you. And we'll have one last question from Megan Stringer with the Express News. There is a bill pending that would allow San Antonio and other Texas cities to spend unused COVID relief funds on infrastructure. Would each of you be interested in doing this? We'll start with Mayor Dan Pope.
I'm not familiar with the bill. I'd have to read the bill to be able to give you a detailed answer, but I would certainly be interested in checking something like that out. There's as my peers on this conference, video conference know, there's an unending need for infrastructure investment in our cities.
I very much support the discretion for cities and the ability to use those dollars. You know, one of the things that we saw during the pandemic was the importance of the infrastructure, certainly in a lot of areas in our cities. We've taken about half of the dollars that are available to us in ARPA, the American Rescue Plan dollars, and put it toward homelessness and to housing. Joining with the county doing the same thing. That's been a challenge grant that's got the rest of the community to participate. And we're building on that. Without those dollars to be able to spend on that kind of infrastructure, this is something we would not be able to accomplish. Every city's different. Every city has different priorities. So giving cities that discretion, I think, is real important.
Yeah, and I very much agree. Cities need the flexibility to determine the best use of those dollars because the pandemic has exacerbated the local issues that have been so present and conspicuous nationwide, but they're all very much different in the different cities. I will say in San Antonio, we spent down the CARES Act dollars at the original deadline. So to go back to what Mayor Pope said, the need is far greater than the resources that are available to us. But to the extent that cities will have that discretion, it's absolutely needed at the local level. So do support the bill. And I think that was our final question. So again, I want to thank all of the press and media partners who are with us today. Mayor Pope, Mayor Adler, Mayor Turner, thank you very much for joining us on this press conference. Again, the message to Congress is act now in support of all of our constituents who we all serve. And that is the message being carried by the Texas Big City Mayors, a bipartisan coalition of mayors who are committed to getting it done regardless of party. So thank you all very much for joining us. Have a great morning.
Thank you, Ron. Dan.
Thanks, Ron. Well done.
Bye, y'all.